Welcome everyone to today's webinar. For those of you not familiar with Blueprint, we've been the market leaders in helping organizations scale best practices in their development to the enterprise for over 10 years now. We are currently Scaled Agile Gold partners, and today we'll be presenting how to scale enterprise agility with SAFe and Blueprint. Today we've got two experts presenting with us on SAFe, and we have Chris Roosh, our VP of Professional Services and Education, and he's a SAFe SPCT candidate. We also have Tony Higgins, he's our VP of Labs and Innovation. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Anand. So in today's talk, we're going to cover a couple different things. First, we're going to start out just talking about the current state of Agile transformation and some observations that we have from our experience doing SAFe rollouts, and particularly around the important aspects of product management in driving successful Agile and SAFe rollouts. We're also going to spend quite a bit of time talking about solution context and solution intent and these key concepts that are part of Scaled Agile framework as they relate to the product development lifecycle. Then we're going to turn things over to my partner Tony to talk about Storyteller and show you how Storyteller is actually used to drive solution content, solution intent, and help product-oriented organizations be successful in their SAFe rollout. Okay. So first, we're going to talk about the importance of product management and shifting to a product focus within an Agile transformation, and specifically within a Scaled Agile transformation. So we're not going to give an overview or introduction to Scaled Agile in this talk. We really want to focus in on what we see as some of the key aspects to being successful, and some of the pitfalls that we commonly see in SAFe adoptions. So when we talk about Agile transformations, this often involves fundamentally a shift from being a project-oriented enterprise to being one that's focused on product development. And what that means is in many organizations, prior to embracing Agile, they've really organized around delivering projects successfully, right? The structure of the organization, the way people are organized, the way funding is done and approval to do work is done is all focused on a project-based way of working. As we shift to Agile, there's a transition here to not thinking about discrete projects with a specific beginning and end and budget tied to the project, but really focused on what are the core products that we support, what do we go to market with, how does our customer think of the experience of working with us, and that's really shifting the focus to how we do product development. And that has impacts in a number of different ways in organizations. One of the most fundamental things that happens is we need to rethink the way that people work together and the way they're organized. And in SAFe, this is done by looking at value streams, and by that we mean what are all of the steps, who are all of the people that are involved from a new business idea or a new product or feature idea, who's everybody who's involved in creating that and delivering it to the market, and breaking down the silos that slow down the development process. In some Agile transformations, this may be really reorganizing people and changing the reporting structures within organizations, or it may be creating virtual organizations. And this is usually what's advocated in SAFe, is creating an Agile release train, which is a virtual organization of people focused on a specific product or suite of products, usually around 125 people that can really plan and deliver together. The other impact that shifting to a product-focused organizations has is creating a real critical need for product managers and product owners. And often in organizations, these are roles that don't currently exist, right? So as part of the Agile and SAFe rollout, it's creating new roles and And sometimes that means moving people from existing roles or providing training in order to do a new job. And this is particularly around product owners, or we see this often as a new role that's created alongside the Scrum Master at the team level. And we need to identify people within the organizations that have the skill and interest to do that work. Right? And often when we talk about product owners, that's people who have a business analyst background or maybe a QA background or experience on the business side. Similarly, at the product manager level, these are people who are really defining the future state of the product, identifying market need and what your customers really want. So these are critically important roles, and we'll talk about why they're important and what they do and how Blueprint and Storyteller support product managers and product owners and by extension the rest of the organization. But before we dig down into that, one of the things that I've observed in my time in helping organizations transition is a real challenge around orienting to be a product-focused company, to the extent that I really refer to it as a product management crisis. We see companies that have this goal of becoming a product company and changing to a product focus. But often this is a significant challenge. Quotes that I've heard from customers recently include, "Our product management has been decimated," that as part of the Agile transformation, or maybe because the Agile transformation didn't happen soon enough, people with this product management expertise left, went to other organizations or weren't properly supported. Or we don't have a product management group at all, right? For organizations that haven't thought about a product focus and product management and have been totally oriented to delivering in a project way, this may be a totally new function that's being rolled out. So how do we help with this? And ultimately the question here is, where do new ideas come from? How do we get them? And how do we communicate those good product ideas to the teams that can actually develop them and deliver them and get them out in the market? And how do we do that? That's both in a way that's fast and efficient and high quality and delivering the right things at the right time. So when we look at Scaled Agile Framework, and this is the full Scaled Agile Framework, and in organizations that are adopting SAFe, you may use some parts of this, right? It's a configurable framework that can scale based on the level of complexity within your organization. But for the purposes of this talk, we're looking at the entire framework. Right? And there's a whole lot going on here. And again, we're not going to go down into to all of the details of it, but we really want to focus on where does this product management function fit into the organization, and ultimately this idea of where do good ideas come from. And unfortunately, when I am talking to people in the Agile community, sometimes even people who are very experienced SAFe practitioners and have SAFe certifications or have been involved in Agile transformations, and we talk about where do good ideas come from, how do ideas get into the pipeline, and how do teams know what they work on. It's often this focus of, we start with epics, we start with a business case and the strategic themes for the organization, and then those get decomposed throughout the backlog and eventually get down to the team, and the team works off user stories that are smaller chunks of these epics that started up top. And often these conversations happen without ever talking about the customer and without ever talking about other people that may be the source of ideas, most often those being the development team, the product management team, your UX team, and other shared services teams. And in reality, in a good, agile, collaborative organization, we are taking input from all of these sources, right? It's not just things that are devolving from a big strategic theme and business case, but there's inputs that are happening in the solution context at different levels of the program, right? So the people who are actually using the application or the product, the people who are actually developing it are going to be making observations, making suggestions, and that gets fed into the ultimate solution. And SAFE accounts for this, and SAFE embraces this idea, particularly around the idea of continuous exploration as part of the DevOps delivery, continuous delivery pipeline. And often that continuous delivery pipeline in DevOps, we think about things from the technical perspective, right? Continuous integration, continuous deployment, automating the tool chain between software development and release. But there's a critical component that happens on the business side as well, and that's the continuous exploration loop. And that's what is really being driven by the product management group and the product owners. And it's really the area that Blueprint and Storyteller help to scale Agile, not just within the development team, but on that business and product side. So when we think about this whole product lifecycle, our friends at Gartner have provided a view that puts together best practices from across the organization. So we have different approaches for solving the problems of collaboration and developing high quality products. On the software development side of the organization, or not just the organization, the software development world, Agile grew out of the software side of things and solved problems that were inherent in a project way of doing things. Lean startup grew out of the startup and entrepreneurial community and heavily influenced by Agile, with another set of best practices that help address this problem. On the product development and the UX side of things, design thinking developed to really address the same problems from their perspective. So when we think about scaling product management, and when we think about scaling SAFE across an enterprise, we need to think about all of these best practices and put them together in a system that really flows and works together and supports that continuous exploration loop that SAFE highlights. So if we dig down into that in a little bit more detail, what happens in that lean product management design thinking approach and within continuous exploration? So SAFE defines continuous exploration as embracing the lean UX approach to things, and specifically calls out several different activities that are happening and inputs and outputs from this process. So fundamentally, we start out with identifying a customer need, right? So we don't want to be going off and building things that nobody wants and that there's not a demand for. So fundamentally, product management is about seeing an opportunity to create something new in the market, and we develop a hypothesis around what that is, how it will be used, and the value that it creates, right? And Agile and Lean is about experimentation and learning, developing hypothesis, and taking input and developing from that. So once we have that hypothesis, we collaborate on a vision. And the key here from a SAFE perspective is SAFE is specifically advocating collaboration across the organization. This isn't product management just coming up with a vision by themselves. It's not just the business. It's working across the organization to get input on the vision from software development, from shared services, from the executives in the organization. There's then activities around conducting research, right? Validating that hypothesis and that vision, and And when we talk about research from a lean product management perspective, this involves all sorts of different activities that are happening within the business and within the product management group. And this can include going out and observing users, see how they're actually using the system, or even more importantly, how they're not using the system and what they're doing outside of your product and application that creates an opportunity to make improvement. Embracing lean ideas like Gemba walks, right? Going to where the work is and seeing how the work is actually being done in the real world, collaborating with your customers and your potential customers. Falling under this is also things like market analysis, market research, competitive analysis, going to conferences, and input on what the potential market is and what potential ideas are. Synthesis is the activity of taking all of that collaboration and research and distilling it into vision, roadmap, and program backlog. And these are the key aspects of the Scaled Agile framework that drive alignment and drive building the right thing. So vision, roadmap, and program backlog are all core concepts and artifacts within Scaled Agile framework, and are the output of this product management function. From there, we then develop the minimal marketable feature. Sometimes people will refer to this as an MVP, minimum viable product. Here we're thinking about, within a safe context, epics and features and getting small consumable chunks of the product out so that it can be used and tested and validated by our customers and our users, so that we can get feedback on it, right? And the most important thing about that feedback is that we can then iterate and pivot and make the product better. And this is of course a cycle that is continuous, and we have all of these activities going on at all times, focused on the next round of features that we're developing. And this life cycle, this lean product management and continuous exploration life cycle, is really what Storyteller and Blueprint is purpose-built to support, and is what helps the organization scale agility, not just within the software development side of the organization, but across the entire product management focused organization. And Tony will be showing us how this works here in a few moments. So what we want to highlight here is that we need to think about Agile, and we need to think about SAFe as more than just nested backlogs where we decompose epics into stories and break them down and fit them into PIs and sprints in order to develop them. Those are really key aspects, and it's incredibly necessary, and it helps the organization in all sorts of ways. But just focused on those backlogs and just focused on the prioritization of those backlogs isn't enough. And there's a reason why there are these other aspects of the Scaled Agile framework that are highlighted. And in particular, what we're going to talk about here is how those activities within the continuous exploration and lean product management lifecycle fit into solution context and solution intent, and how we support those concepts that are kind of your front and center in the SAFe framework, and the importance that they have. So Storyteller as a product is focused on business agility. It empowers our business users and product managers to do that continuous exploration, to document the system intent and collaborate and align across the organization around the vision, around the roadmap, and make sure that we have a good, solid product backlog that can drive business value. Another key here is integrating into the entire DevOps tool chain. Integration with tools across the organization is what enables organizations to go fast and eliminate waits and bottlenecks. And And we need to think about DevOps and automation not just on the software development side or on the release side, but also on the business and the product management side. And that's what Storyteller and Blueprint do. And critically important, what Storyteller does is help us define and maintain our solution intent. So I want to dig down into what solution intent is in SAFe. And SAFe defines solution intent as the set of activities and artifacts and deliverables that aligns the system builders with the business and with product management and assures that the system actually is delivering what we want it to and that we know what it's doing. So this is SAFe's definition of solution intent. It's the single source of truth regarding the intended and actual behavior of the solution. And that's a really important concept, right? We're not just talking about requirements here, right? We're requirements in a traditional sense where here's what we intend the solution to do. But in an agile and SAFe solution intent, we're talking about the actual behavior of the solution in terms of its requirements, its design, and the system architectural decisions. And this is important for both aligning the vision, but it's also important for concepts like reuse and identifying compliance and how do we make changes in the future when new regulatory compliance requirements come out. How do we know where to go and make all those changes within our system? And we want to be very cautious here that this isn't implying that this is a big upfront design by any means, right? This is the solution intent is an agile construct that's developed iteratively over the course of the product lifecycle. And a really important concept here is the idea of variable versus fixed solution intent. And when you first start a new product, there's very little that's fixed in the solution intent. You're learning, you're hypothesizing, you're modeling out different alternatives and building them out. And over time, you make decisions that start to solidify that solution intent, which it doesn't mean to say that they can't be changed, but it means that once you've made a decision about what the infrastructure and foundational systems that you're going to use are, it becomes more expensive and difficult to change those. Okay? So this is really what Storyteller is doing. It's the single source of truth for how the system works, for the non-functional requirements, and for your design decisions, your architecture decisions, and tests. Another important concept that we want to highlight here is SAFe defines a part of the solution intent as model-based systems engineering. And this is a really important concept for us. And when we get here into the demo of Storyteller, you'll see that Storyteller is really based on modeling out our business processes and thinking about things in visual ways and models. And the idea with model-based system engineering is that it's an approach to system engineering that focuses on domain models and visualization as the primary means of information exchange, rather than document and text-based information exchange. And this allows us to do all sorts of things from a compliance and impact analysis perspective to building our models, and we'll see how this works in Storyteller. And this is really a different way of thinking about how you design systems and how you work through systems, and it's really in stark contrast to a simple agile way of thinking that is you have text-based epics that you break down into text-based user stories, right? There's more to that, and there's richer ways to communicate, and we want to make sure that we're always using the richest, most collaborative ways of defining and developing our systems. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Tony, who's going to take some of these concepts that we talked about and talk about how it's actually done in Storyteller. So over to you, Tony.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Yeah, so as Chris had mentioned, as you can see, the SAFE diagram, and Chris already highlighted some of the points where Storyteller excels. And in this particular demo that I want to walk you through, I do want to focus on these two key areas, solution context and solution intent. As Chris had mentioned, we're pretty unique in the industry in terms of our ability to address those two areas. So where I'd like to start is just to draw your attention. This is Storyteller, by the way, what it looks like when you first log in, to the far left side, left top, where we have our Project Explorer. And it is laid out, as you can see, according to SAFE and the SAFE layers. We did, in this particular example, highlight and show solution context and solution intent explicitly because we feel it deserves that degree of importance. But as you can see, it's not only those two aspects that we cover, but the other layers as well above team. And we hold information in here, but it's also live synchronized where appropriate with other solutions like Agile ALM tooling. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we move along. So for example, here we can see a portfolio epic with all the various properties, and I think it goes without saying this is configurable. So whatever properties you choose to have to augment, to tune, to adapt to your particular adaptation of SAFE if that's needed. But this is a basic template, if you will, that we would prescribe in most situations. So you can see the various relevant properties with the portfolio epic. Along with, if I draw your attention to the right-hand side, that this particular epic is traced to two strategic themes. So underlying Storyteller is a very rigorous and detailed fine-grained traceability capability. So this is an example of it. So as you're working as needed, you can see those very important relationships, in this case, back to themes. And this, again, is one example where this epic, you probably would want to have it synchronized. And our bidirectional real-time synchronization or integration capability allows you to hook up to most popular Agile ALM solutions to achieve that. In this particular case, you can see a hypothesis statement with a template for the wording of it right out of SAFE. Excuse me. And I just wanted to highlight the point here that all the work related to continuous exploration, as Chris introduced us, can also be managed in Storyteller. The recording of customer visits, studies, elicitations, prototypes, associated feedback from these, and the similar activities, Chris gave an exhaustive list, can all be captured. And then as features that address market and user needs are discovered for the epic through these continuous exploration activities, those features can be entered into Storyteller as well. And if you choose, live synchronized over to the ALM solution. So here, for example, for that epic, where you can see the lightweight business case for the portfolio epic that I introduced as well. So this can be captured. And then we migrate downward into the solution context. And Chris gave you a very exhaustive overview of it. This is just some example artifacts. So things like environmental block diagrams. We can see how what we're working on can fit into the larger ecosystem and what those integration points are, the details of the integrations, operational concepts. These are all kinds of things that we can put in solution context. In addition to customer journey, so that highest level customer journey that what we're working on, the solution we're working on, plays a role in one or more aspects of it. And it's very important, as you would imagine, to understand how in that context the system you're developing fits and supports. If I go down a layer further into solution intent, one thing that and SAFE also divides it into current and intended, and we've chosen to divide it as such in our organization here, as you can see. So on the current side, this is really capturing the current state of capabilities. Rarely do you have the opportunity of greenfield development. There's always something in IT that you're building on, around, or with, or transitioning. And it's extremely important that you have a solid understanding of what that current state is. So that as well can be represented in Storyteller. In fact, we have some unique technologies available that allow you to do things like reverse engineer regression test suites. Sometimes, especially with legacy applications, knowledge of that current state is lacking. And this is one way that we can offer capabilities to even extract that knowledge from, I guess, places where it's held captive, like source code, for example, but in this case, regression test suites to reverse engineer that and be able to have visual usage models that you can then get that understanding of current state to help you drive forward. Also in solution intent, as I mentioned, there's the intended area, that which we're going to focus on building out. And in here is where we would typically put our features. As you can see, a feature in this particular case, perhaps identified through the continuous exploration activities. And again, just to make the point that these would be live synchronized over to whatever your Agile ALM solution. And it's typically there that you would do the prioritization and the tracking associated with that feature's implementation. Traceability, of course, at every level. In this particular case, you certainly want to know the epoch that these features are associated with. And also, in terms of properties, I won't go through them all, but do want to draw your attention to the fact that we can delineate between the fixed and variable intent, as Chris introduced, using properties for that purpose, as you see here. The other thing Storyteller is able to do is it has a very powerful but simple and lightweight ability to model process scenarios to help describe and illustrate those features, to better explain them, to better collaborate with the team to define what those features actually are. And we can do this at high levels. We can, in fact, take those and drive them into whatever level of detail and granularity you choose. Some prefer to stay at a high level, others, and maybe it depends on the actual feature that we're talking about and its complexity, we may want to drive it down to greater and greater levels of detail. In the extreme, you can take it right down to intended user system behavior. And if you do so, you can auto-generate at any of these levels, in fact, but at the lowest level, they would in effect be auto-generating user stories or epics. When we do that from those models, we extract all the relevant information and we're able to construct stories that look exactly like the one on your screen, along with acceptance criteria in given when then format, which we then also encapsulate into a .feature file for Gherkin testing. In addition, if you choose to augment before and after system responses with screenshots, wireframes, drawings, whatever, they will come out as well as a package as part of that story to help drive development. The other things that are auto-generated from those process scenario models are functional tests. So an exhaustive set of functional tests covering all aspects of those scenarios are produced, like the one you see here, which can be driven into, again, the most popular test management solutions. I just happen to show it in Excel, which is another option for output. And as well as those .feature files, or the Gherkins, that are auto-generated. So these are all just some of the automation capabilities of Storyteller, again, that you can leverage if choosing to model those features out with these simple, lightweight process scenarios. Another thing that's very important when we're talking about solution intent are the non-functional requirements, especially in an IT context when we get into operations, which is where a multitude of these non-functionals actually stem from, things in the realms of security and reliability and availability and so on and so forth. So the features, the process models, even the individual aspects of these modules can be traced to that level of granularity off to relevant non-functional requirements. And to actually help, because it can be quite onerous trying to make sure that we got all of the non-functionals accounted for that are relevant, we also have a capability in Storyteller called Intelligent Recommendations, which does semantic-based analysis and find highly relevant non-functional requirements, and then it's up to you to choose, are they indeed applicable or not. You can just check the box and instantly trace them. So it helps you ensure that no non-functionals are missing, which again, if there are any missing, of course, that can become quite costly later on downstream when you discover later. The non-functionals themselves are again held in solution intent. We would put them in an area like you see here under the intent folder. And of course, you can categorize them however you want. We chose the categorization espoused by Roxanne Miller, which stems across 3 main categories and 14 subcategories, as you can see here. But again, it's truly up to you as to how you choose to configure that. As well as non-functional, most of the organizations using our products are in heavily regulated industries, things like financial services, insurance, healthcare, medical devices, and regulations, and the need to comply with regulations and to be able to, have auditable compliance is quite important. And so in a similar fashion to non-functionals, we can show traceability to discrete regulatory requirements as well. And those regulations broken down into the individual obligations can be recorded in Storyteller, as you see on the left-hand side as well. So everything is in one single source of the truth, as Chris had put it, under its solution intent. Non-functionals, regulatory, all the features we're developing, divided into current, state, and intended. Then what I can do is, figuratively speaking, go up to the 10,000 foot level, and through that fine-grained traceability that we have, we can get a view from the highest level aspects at portfolio, the various themes, for example, as you can see here, but all the way down to the level of decomposition that you chose to do in Storyteller, and kind of orthogonally out to the non-functionals and the regulations and business rules and whatever other constraints happen to be imposed. Highly powerful view, as you can imagine, to see how everything is related. And this definitely is a view for analysis, as you can drill down, you can go back up, you can click any of these to be able to see the details of them to help you perform your analysis activities. Last thing I want to mention is that there are other capabilities in Storyteller that can be suited for use in SAFE, things like baselines and reviews. Not everybody uses them, but they're certainly there and available. Many do. So for example, when we, at the conclusion of PI planning, for example, we can draw a quick baseline, sort of a line in the sand, so we have always a record we can go back to at any point in time to see what all the assets were that we had at that point in time. And we can also have reviews which allow us, perhaps if we have a distributed team, across continents and time zones, we can come in online and offer feedback and draw these collaborative sessions to a conclusion, again, having a permanent record of that available. And with that, I'll pass it back to Chris.
All right, thanks, Tony. So that's given you some insight into to our views around being product focused and the importance of solution intent, solution context, and how Storyteller supports it. In addition to the tool and Storyteller that we provide, Blueprint is also comes along with services that help partner with you to make these changes within your organization a reality. So along with Storyteller, we have expertise in safe transformation, and particularly a focus on the product management, the business side, and particularly creating that full biz DevOps loop. We can work with you to create that continuous delivery pipeline through integration with the other tools in your ecosystem. Tony talked about some of those integrations. That in today's world, when you're embracing Agile and you're breaking down silos within the organization, making everybody collaborative, that needs to happen with the tool set and the ecosystem as well, right? So isolated systems that aren't talking and exchanging information don't work in an agile or DevOps environment. Blueprint also provides the full range of SAFe training, as well as embedded experts and coaches with expertise in bringing this product management focus and implementing SAFe and other agile approaches. And we have an extensive partner network, so this isn't just Blueprint. We have a global ecosystem of partners that help with our implementations and can help embed Storyteller and these product management focused activities into your business model as part of your SAFe transformation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anand.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Tony. That was an excellent overview of how we can scale Agile using SAFe and Blueprint. We have a couple questions from attendees on the phone. The first one is talking about the SAFe model. So the question is, we're currently using Essential SAFe, but we don't focus on solution context and solution intent. Do these concepts apply in my Essential SAFe practice? And I'll pass that over to you, Chris. I think you were talking about this a little bit.
Sure, this is a great question. So as we said kind of at the beginning when we were showing the Scaled Agile framework, we were showing full SAFe used for very large, complex organizations. Essential SAFe is talking about configuring the framework to use the really fundamental core concepts of SAFe, which is really at the program and team level and focused on one or more arts working on discrete products. This is often where organizations start. So starting with Essential SAFe and then scaling to the rest of the organization is a common adoption model in large enterprises. And for smaller organizations, Essential SAFe might be all they need, right? So for small startups or mid-sized organizations. So the question of if we configure SAFe for that, do we really need to worry about solution intent and solution context? The answer is yes, right? That if we get to that lean UX product management model, all of those activities around continuous exploration and solution intent are important. But we will say it's not as complex, right? That the solution intent in smaller organizations using Essential SAFe is usually more straightforward, and you may have less cross-product and cross-team coordination to happen. So it's still there, and all of the tools and activities that we talked about are still relevant, and Storyteller still supports those. But it's usually more straightforward.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris. The second question that we have on the line is about tooling discussion. So the question is, we're currently using version 1 to support our SAFe practices. How does Blueprint work with this tooling environment? And Tony, I know that you touched on that a little bit in your presentation, so could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, sure. And it's pretty much the same regardless of which ALM solution that you're using, whether it's Jira version 1, CA Agile Central, and the list goes on. And we integrate with again, a very long list of these. But essentially, as I alluded to in the demo, think of the Agile ALM solution as managing the work. So the breakdown of it, the tracking of progress, etc., and using Storyteller to define what that work is, how it's related back up to things like operational value streams and customer journeys, how it relates into non-functionals and regulations, and keeping track of that massive volume of extremely important information, especially for large programs. So again, as I say, down at the granular level, it's a bidirectional synchronous integration we have with version 1 and the other Agile ALM solutions, highly configurable. What I showed you today and talked about was the typical configuration where things like epics and stories are live synchronized. So just imagine folks coming in through their version 1 UI, working on epics, and down the hall someone, or in the next cubicle over or desk over, someone coming in through the Storyteller UI. They're really acting on the same information, the same data. So consider it a single database, if you will. And that's really the effect. So again, you can live synchronize the information that makes sense to live synchronize. It doesn't make sense for all of it to be, and we can certainly help and advise on that front.
Thanks very much, Tony. So that wraps up our webinar for today. For more information about SAFE and about our solution, please feel free to follow us on LinkedIn and on Twitter. And there's a wealth of information on our website about how to scale Agile effectively to the enterprise. And that's at www.blueprintsys.com. Thanks very much, everyone.